Good afternoon. I wanted to do a video today, not necessarily about sharpening, because, I mean, how many sharpening videos can you take? At the same time, I mean, I'm doing this just for fun. It's, not a lot of people watch these, but it's just something to sort of document what I'm doing as a woodworker, a homeowner, a whole 9 yards. And what I wanted to talk about, really, a subject I want to talk about is my workbench height, and I've probably talked about this before, and it's something that's bothered me for years. That when I first started woodworking, the first bench I ever built was sort of modeled after. I saw it in I think it was Woodsmith magazine, I want to say, and it was really similar. If you've ever seen the old Aldell's carpentry books, it was really similar to one of the benches that they recommended building in that book. And it was actually a nice bench. It worked really well. Really the only drawback on it was it didn't have storage below, which I probably could have added, but when I started getting serious, the so-called Roubeau workbench became it was like the popular bench du jour, and everybody in the woodworking world seemed to be building some version of it. And so I built this bench, which was in a way modeled after it. It was really the main cue I took from it was the heavy legs, but otherwise it's sort of a mishmash. I hate to use that word, of a few different workbenches that I just built, that I copied, and built this version of the bench. The top of this bench is actually, I didn't use laminated 2x4s or 2x6s to build the top. What I did, I had the first bench I built had these laminated pine panels that are really nice and flat, and I basically just sandwiched two of them together, glued them, and screwed them. So when I built this bench, I added a third one of those panels and eventually a fourth. And there's been changes and whatnot, but generally it's been the same bench I built back in 2011, I think it was, if I remember correctly. But the real problem I have with the bench, it's been a really good bench, except for the one thing and I noticed this of all things, in all places, of last night. I When I film these videos, I don't really tend to watch them. I look at them to make sure that everything looks sort of okay, but I don't tend to sit there and scrutinize them. But last night, we'd gone out and we stopped at a friend's house, and got home, and I turned on. It was pretty late, so I usually, what I'll do, I'll put on YouTube and I'll watch whatever, Bob Ross, whatever thing I think's gonna put me to sleep. And of all things, when I woke up, YouTube was still on, and my video of, it was not the one I filmed sharpening the pocket knife. It was the one before that, where I think I demonstrate this coffin smoother here. But I'm looking at it, and I notice I'm sort of hunched over the bench, and that's the whole point. What I found is, when I built this bench, the conventional wisdom was you stand next to your bench, and your knuckles should sort of be just over the top of the bench when you're just standing relaxed. And see, so it's right around there. This is actually a touch taller than the bench that a lot of people recommend it. So you can see where my wrist is, and here is the bench top. And so that's what I did, and I eventually added another edge glued panel on here, So the bench is 33 and 7/8 inches tall, and it does sit on a pad, a rubber, like a garage mat. Just like informally here. Yeah, I am in my sneakers 6 feet and just over 6 feet tall. So I'll do that again. This would be on the. So yep, I am 72 and like a 1/16 of an inch tall in shoes. I'm really about when I was younger and not slouchy, I was about five. I was just under 6 feet tall. I'm about 5'11" now, if I were to be measured by an actual doctor with real measuring equipment. Just at maybe just over 5'11". But the point being, this bench, according to the wisdom, probably should only have been 30 to 31 inches tall. And I found that is maybe the stupidest advice I've ever taken since I've woodworked. This bench, I would feel more comfortable if this bench were about maybe 30, at least another inch taller, but maybe even 2 inches. And I guess the whole idea was, oh, well, you're planing, you want to be down on top of the plane, you're using your weight, your upper body, and that is mind-numbingly stupid. I don't know who thought of that, who I mean, I can name names of some of the people who were advocating for this. I'm not going to. It's not really my place. But I will say that their advice sucked. It was horrible. I do much more sawing and chisel work at this bench than I ever did planing. I talked about this before. Planing to me is at the end of the project, not the beginning. If I were prepping wood boards that were literally from the tree, and getting them down to rough size and all that, I still want a lower bench. But I want a bench that's 3 inches shorter than this one. This bench height would be fine for that. For everything else, it's just like when I take my saw here. If I'm sawing something in this vise, this is about the height I want it. Now the problem is this stick here is generally not going to be the height of a board I'm sawing if I'm putting dovetails in, for example. If I'm making a little box like this, I like to keep about half of the board in the vise and half out. That's common sense. I said this over and over again, and I think I hate to drop names because it's really not my place, but Paul Sellers brought this up in one of his videos a few years back, talking about bench height, and he uses a 38-inch tall bench and has no trouble planing anything, and it makes sawing and other like chisel type tasks a lot easier. That was the other argument was, well, you could chisel easier because the benches are, and once again, who thought of this? Who was this person who came up with this idea? And the real thing was, it came because people in the 18th century were shorter, and once again, I probably talked about this before, but it's just true. And in theory they weren't, but in reality they were. Most people, the average size man in the 18th century was probably about 5'6". So of course his bench was going to be shorter, and may have even been shorter than that. It was not a matter of genetics; it was a matter of nutrition and other factors that that people just weren't as large as they are now. Like for instance, I'm an average sized person. As I said, in my shoes, I'm about 6 feet tall and I weigh just under 200 pounds. I would have been massive in 1770. I would have been a big dude. So when the so-called gurus talked about bench height, and it was my fault. I was stupid enough to listen, and I wanted to stress that don't always follow the advice of the day, at least not from one source. If you're looking to make like a workbench, a shop appliance, find 4 or 5 different sources of information and go through them. Don't just look at one person's idea and think that that is automatically going to be correct. You have options. Don't. You can always solve. You can always make a bench shorter, making it taller. So I was going to put this bench on. But it was a pain in the neck, and I actually one time I put 2x6s under it, and it didn't seem steady anymore. So it is what it is right now, and I'm not going to change it. I did at one time. I built the frame of a new bench, but I never got around to building. I was going to make a laminate top, but I just never got around to doing it because it was a matter of time and money. More time. The money really wasn't a big issue, because at that point, construction lumber was really inexpensive, not like it is today. So what I'm going to do, and what brought this on, as I said, was I was looking at my videos and I'm like, I could see even in the video, even though you can't really see my face too much in these videos, I could see that like I don't stand up straight to begin with, but I'm sort of like hunched over everything I'm doing because the bench is not high enough. It's just and I've talked about this in my blog. I've talked about this on video. I'm almost sure, almost positive. But it's one of those things. If I if I could help one person, I'd be happy. But yeah, and what I'm going to do, the reason I'm even talking about this is I'm going to sharpen this. This is a belt knife I made from a cat a few years back. And what sort of brought this on was I purchased this a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I just about 5 years ago, I had considered. I used to do a lot of volunteering with the Park Service, and one of the rangers had mentioned that he thought I'd be a really good sort of. I don't want to call it a reenactor because that would infer that I was doing like battles and stuff, but more of like a living history type of guy who would stand at one of the cabins at Valley Forge Park or what have you, and be like the resident soldier, the resident trapper, blacksmith, whatever, the carpenter in the camp. And so I looked into getting into that, and there was a list of materials like you needed certain clothing and it had to be authentic. There were certain vendors they recommended using, and I did actually pick up a few of the items. And one of the recommended items I had was a belt knife like this one. And long story short is at this point at that time, the uniform, the kit came up to about $1,500. They do pay you, but it was a lot of money to put out, and I didn't want to think about. I wasn't doing it for money. I didn't want to. I don't want to make this about money. It wasn't. I was doing it because I really enjoy history and I like volunteering and all of that, but it just was a lot of money to put out at that time, and the payback would have taken over a few years. I mean, which once again I have to stress this. I was not in that for the money. I would have done it for free. It was just a matter of forking out $1,500. And when you have I'm like a lot of people. I have a family. I have a house. I have a mortgage and car payments and maintenance. So I just didn't do it, but maybe one day down the road I will. But this knife has never really been sharpened. Only because I didn't want to have this razor sharp knife. There was no need to carry this around at a park, at a reenactment site. But I am going to try to sharpen it today and see what happens. And it's, as I talked about in my last video, the whole the whole theory behind knife sharpening, a dual beveled knife like this one, is you're raising the bar, removing the bar just like a chisel, but you're doing it on both sides, what they would call apexing, meaning that both bevels come to the theoretical infinity point. But just like sharpening the little pocket knife, this will probably actually be a little bit easier, I hope. And you find your angle and you just want to maintain that angle. It doesn't have to be a perfect whatever, 20 degrees, 18 degrees. It has to be steady on both sides. So we want to push into and follow that bevel. You might hear vehicles going by outside. It's a beautiful day today. I have my garage door open. Speaking of Valley Forge, the reason I didn't, it actually brought this to mind. The reason I had actually thought about making the router plane, starting the router plane kit today, and it was just so nice out that we went to Valley Forge Park and took a walk around. It was a picture perfect day. It was 60 degrees, blue skies. Yesterday we have a pretty large sugar maple tree in our yard, and I think just about half of the leaves fell off of it in one afternoon. So that's what I was doing yesterday afternoon and this morning. So the best laid plans, but house comes before woodworking projects, and I had to get my lawn cleaned up, which is what I did for the bulk of yesterday afternoon and part of this morning. I purchased this knife kit from. I generally don't like giving out links or because I don't like giving out advice. Period. I don't want somebody to go on to the site and they buy it and say, "Oh, this is horrible." But I purchased it from a company called Townsend's and Sons. They make a lot of the reenactment equipment you'll find in national parks and movies. Actually, they've done plenty of movies because their uniforms and all the gear is really pretty authentic, much more authentic than a lot of different places offer. And authenticity can be pretty expensive. And I said before, there's cost and there's worth. Something might, or cost and value really, worth and value. You could take for instance, a luxury car like a Rolls Royce, and whatever they cost, a few $100,000 or more. I'm assuming now, they could be worth every penny in terms of their quality, but their value to the average person is much less than you would pay for it. Meaning that the average person can get a really good quality, reliable car for a quarter of that price or less. But with Townsend's and places like Townsend's, the authenticity is what you're paying for. There's no way to really fake that when you're into the historical reenactment programs and stuff like that. And I give those people a lot of credit. It takes a lot of effort and study to be good at that. And most of them are not doing that for their living. They do it really on the side because they love it. So I'm trying to raise the bar here. This stone is unfortunately taking a beating. I've used it more in the past, probably the past month than I have in a long, long time. And the crack is really pronounced now. I think what I'm going to do is, when my wife asks me what I want for Christmas, I tell her to purchase me a new Arkansas stone. I can actually see a bar raising here. This is going to take a little longer than it did the pocket knife, because I mean, it's slicing through this sheet of paper here, but not cleanly. The pocket knife had actually been sharpened before. This never really has. After the initial grinding, it was never really sharpened. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. I was trying to do it slow for the sake of the video. Just like when I sharpen chisels on the videos, I actually move a little bit slower than I normally would. I wish knife sharpening is something that I've been trying to get into again lately. I really admire some of the videos I've seen where the guys are just really good at it. Trying to keep the number of strokes consistent here. If you can't tell, I'm probably not doing a great job of it. See what I have here. It's sharp, but it's still tearing a little bit more than I'd like. That's pretty clean. It's not too bad. I think maybe another 2 minutes or so. So I'm a pretty big proponent of the national park system. Nearly everybody I've met who works for the park system is they're really good people, very dedicated to their jobs. And it's not an easy job. A lot of travel involved. Not everybody gets to stay at one park their entire life. Some people travel from place to place to place, and I'm sure they in some ways enjoy it. I'm not a young man anymore, as I've pointed out many times. Don't like traveling like I used to. I'm good with staying along the east coast of the United States. Plenty of great beaches. I love the beach. And that's what I like to do in the summer. Maybe one day I'll hit continental Europe. I don't necessarily know if I'd enjoy it or not. Sure I would to an extent. I know there's certain places in Europe where Americans aren't necessarily all that liked, but I mean, that's definitely sharp. I just don't know if it's sharp the way I want it. We can try stropping it. See, probably a little too far away here. See, if you could see me here, like, I'm really hunched over. And I do slouch. I'll be the first person to tell you. I don't slouch as much. It's because of the bench. And the older I get, the more it's one of those things. It's really noticeable because I can actually sometimes I come out of this garage feeling really stiff. I mean, I would say that's pretty sharp. It's not incredibly sharp, but it's sharp. Sharp enough to, I mean, easily slice through a piece of copy paper. So, you know, I said it earlier. I didn't want to make this really about sharpening, but just, you know, little woodworking shop talk. Well, it's pretty sharp. I just sliced through the leather. And really, the main point of this video is not really sharpening a belt knife like this one, but making sure that, especially, really, it's just for new people. Don't get hooked onto one person and do everything that they say they do. Unlike this hobby, and if it's your job, this job is not a job where X goes to Y, you know, point A goes to point B. There's so many different variables, so many different little things that everybody does a little bit differently, because it's not the whole concept behind hobby woodworking especially is it's finding your own way. And a lot of times what you do, even to use music as an example, you could take a guitar and hand it to 5 accomplished guitar players who all make it sound great, but they all have a little bit of a different style. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to woodworking. Do not get on one person's philosophy and run with it. Make sure that you do try a lot of different things. Go and do stuff that you normally don't think you would do. Don't look at a workbench plan and say, this height's going to be a perfect height for me. Stuff like that. It really will mess you up down the road. I'm 11 or 12 years into this bench now, and it's been a great bench. Don't get me wrong, but there are one really big thing I changed with it is the height of the bench, and every other aspect of this bench has come about due to my personal experience using it. I've modified it several different times to where this iteration here is probably, I think, the last major change I made to this bench was about 5 or 6 years ago. And the one thing that I don't like is the one major piece of advice I took when I built it, which was making it a height that was based off of an arbitrary concept of you want to be able to bear down when you're playing it. I'll say it again. It was the absolute stupidest advice I've taken as far as I've been woodworking. So don't be like me. Find find a few sources before you decide to invest the time into making something like a workbench, or there's other different aspects of woodworking where you really need to discover your own path, and it's always good to, before you follow that path, so to speak, find a few different routes. Don't just look at the one map that might have been drawn up 300 years ago. And I have all the respect in the world for the woodworkers of the past. They were really the apex of furniture making, but we're talking about an ergonomic factor, not their skill level. Because they were incredible, we seem to think, well, they were incredible because their bench was really low. No, their bench was really low because it was an ergonomic decision. It was a decision made to optimize their work. It wasn't a measurement set in stone. Stand next to your bench, and if your knuckles here, your bench is too high. That is freaking nonsense. As I said, it is. My mind is boggled, and I like to consider myself a fairly smart guy, and I'm the fact that I listen to that is just bugs. Sorry, don't want to use any four-letter words. It just really bugs me. So that all being said, have fun with your sharpening. Keep practicing, and have a good time with this. Don't get stuck on some one or two people's their nonsense, because I can pretty much guarantee you that it's going to lead into a lot of frustration and disappointment. So hope you have a great night, and hope the Phillies win a World Series. Thanks.